All right, so we're starting Daf Chaf Gimel. We're on the last line of Chaf Beis and Beis Amar of Yechanan Mishum Mishum Ben Yoed Tzadok. So remember, we were coming off the story of, we said that Shaul was nenash because he was machal al kavod. He was machal al kavod Melech, so he didn't stand up for the kavod malchus, for the position of the king, and therefore, so we're going to now come off of this and say similarly, that he doesn't take nekama or noiter is bear a grudge, kinachash, like a snake. Einay talmid chacham. He's not a talmid chacham. So what we're saying is that there are certain, and the Gemara is going to we're going to quantify this, but there's certain situations in which a talmid chacham must take revenge and bear a grudge. So frak the Gemara, but how could you say that? It says loisikaim v'loisitor. It says specifically in the pasuk, it's a daraisa. You cannot take nekama and you cannot bear a grudge. So the Gemara says hu ben mammon hu dichsev. That's when it comes to money. Titania, like we learned in the Brisa, ezehu nekima. What is this? What does this mean, nekima? What is nekama? Ezehu netira. Right? What's the difference between nekama and netira? Nekima. So what is nekima? Amar loy. Let's say one person says to another, hishilani maglech, lend me your saw. Amar loy, and the other person responds. So Reuben says to Shimon, can I borrow your saw? And Shimon says no. So Amar loy, lav, right? Shimon says no. L'machar. So what happens? Shimon comes to Reuben and says, can I borrow your? Amar loy, who? Amar loy, who? Shimon now comes to Reuben and says, hashileni kardumach. Can you lend me your hatchet? So Amar loy, he responds, Reuben says, no, I'm sorry. Eini mashilcha, I'm not going to lend it to you. Shaloi hishaltani. Just like you didn't lend it to me yesterday, I'm not going to lend it to you today. That is nakama. Zui nekima. Bezu netira. Now what is netira bearing grudge? Amar lei hishilni kardumach. So Reuben says to Shimon, lend me your hatchet. Amar lei, Shimon says, no, loy. Lamachar amar lei. Shimon now comes to Reuben and says, amar lei hishani chalukach. Lend me your shirt, your cloak, something. Okay? So Amar Lai, Shimon says to Reuben, Halach, take it, enjoy it. Eini kamaisach. I'm not like you, Shalei Shaltani, that refuses to lend. Suzuhi Netira, that even if you end up lending, you're not allowed to bear the grudge and you can't keep it in. Okay, so at this point, what we're saying is that there's an isser of loisikam and loisitar when it comes to money or kalim or things that have to do with money. However, when someone insults you, then you, a Talmud Chacham is supposed to be noikem v'noiter. So the Gemara asks, "V'tzari degufa law." You're telling me that you're supposed to be noikem v'noiter when it comes to tzara degufa, somebody insults you or something of the like. V'hatanya hanalovin. People who suffer insults, ve'ina elvin, and they don't respond, they don't insult back. Sheimin cherpasan ve'ina meshivin. They hear they're being disgraced, and they don't respond. Oisin me ahava v'smeichin b'yisurin. Someone who does the right thing, ve'ahava, and he's happy with the yisurin. So all these people, they're all in the category. So the ayav of Hashem is Ketzeis Hashem V'Rasu. So we're saying it's a good thing for someone who does not respond. Dahainu takes it, gets insulted and takes it. So you're telling me that a Talmud Chacham is supposed to be Neikim V'Neiter. He's supposed to stand up. He's supposed to respond. And we see here you're not supposed to respond. So the Gemara says La'olam dinakit le belibe. So what we mean here is don't actually respond. Keep it in. Don't respond. What does that mean? Okay, Gemara meant keep it inside, and Rashi says ve'imba acher lim kaina kamasa. So let's say you're a Talmud Chacham. Let's say you have Talmidim. Let's say the Talmidim go ahead. So they know that some bad guy, you're a Talmud Chacham. They insulted you. They bothered you. They insulted you. So something of tzara deguf. So if Rashi says ve'imba acher lim kaina kamasa, if somebody else takes up your cause. B'kima mishpat yishtai. Okay, you can be quiet. You don't have to necessarily tell them to stop. So what we're saying is you're allowed to bear the grudge inside so that if something bad happens to them, you can feel good about it. Or if someone goes ahead and does it, right? But you're not supposed to actually actively you shouldn't take action to be nikaim v'nitzar, even if it's tzar deguf, not a money. It says someone who lets things go. Ma'avir amidosa means that you let it go. So then we say ma'avir loy kol pishav. Okay, and here we said kol talmid chacham she'ena nikim v'noiter kenachash ena talmid chacham. Right, so we have to now here we have a third one. It says you're supposed to be ma'avir amidosa. You are supposed to let it go. So the Gemara says the mefaisu mefayis. That is talking about if somebody asks for mechila, then you're supposed to be mefayis. So what we basically have at this point is we have three categories, right? We have a talmid chacham she'ena noikim v'noiter kenachash. Any talmid chacham who doesn't take revenge, like we saw from Shaul, is not a talmid chacham, doesn't stand up for his Torah. So we're saying that is in a situation where you don't say anything. The guy never did mechila. Okay, the guy bothered you. You're not supposed to say anything. You shouldn't go out and fight the guy back, right? You shouldn't go insult him back. But rather, what we're saying is inside, let it go. And if you're talmidim, go ahead and start to take nekama. Good, keep quiet. Don't actively do it. But that's what we're saying. Then what we say is when is it an Isser D'Oraisa to do Nakama? That's when it has to do with money or Kalim or things like that. And what we're also saying is if the guy who did something to you went ahead and if the guy who did something to you or did something to the Talmid Chacham went ahead and asked for Mechila, then the right thing is to be Mephias and to be Ma'avar Amidosav and to let it go, to not hold it in. Even quietly. Okay, so those are the three categories. Now, just a couple of interesting things here. Rashi says, Neki v'noiter, the first on the top line, he says, Eva kenachash b'libai. You hold it like a snake. And Marshal says that the reason specifically a snake, and it fits into the Gemara, is that just like a snake attacks, it's on the akav, on the heel. It's something that you do quietly. So too when a person is taking the kama, even in the right situation, like we said, it should be done quietly. It should be done kind of like on the heel. So that's why we compare it to a nachash. The interesting shot here. Anyway, okay. So now let's get back to Akiva came finally after days and days of Agadata. You came for the end of the Agadata. Now we're going to get back to Yuma stuff. Brought it upon yourself.
I did.
Okay. Umahein Moitzian Achas Ishtayim. Okay, so we said that, remember, they were running up. Okay, Berishayna, they ran up. Then they said, okay, we're going to have a pious. So how did a pious work? A pious work that they would, the Kehanim, and I think we went through it in the Mishnah. Rashi explained that the Kehanim, they would get around in a circle. One guy would take off, one Kehanim would take off his mitznefes. That's where the pious started from. And they'd go around counting. But they couldn't count people, so they had to count fingers. Right? And we said, Maitzi an achas or shnayim. 1 finger or 2 fingers. Now, to just be clear, the way the Gemara is going to paskin, the Gemara seems to be saying, there is one reason it doesn't say like that, but at least the way everybody seems to be saying, and the way that the Pashut Mashmos of the Gemara is, otherwise you have to come on to Girsa changes, is that each person only counted, whether you put out 1 finger or 2 fingers or 3 fingers or 9 fingers, you only counted as 1. We were counting people, we're not allowed to count people like we saw yesterday, so we counted fingers. So now the Gemara is going to try to understand, well, why do you have 2 fingers versus 1 finger if you only get 1 counting spot anyway, right? And like we explained in the Mishnah, that to make sure that it wasn't predictable, they used to take a huge number, a much bigger number than the amount of people that were there, so they would go around. Okay, so the Kohen Gadol would pick a number, and then he would count can't count people, so he would count each person's fingers. Okay, and then the question is, they either would be mitzvah 1 finger or 2. So the Gemara says, Umahein mitzian achas shtayim. Frek the Gemara hashta shtayim mitzian achas mibay. If you can put out 2, so of course you can put out 1. So what are we saying? Amar Rav Chisda like kasha. When the Mishnah says 1 or 2, what does it mean? Kam bebari, a healthy person who has good dexterity, so he can isolate 1 finger. Okay, but kan b'chayla, a weak person, they don't necessarily have the muscle strength to be able to put out 1 finger. It takes much more effort to separate fingers.
Are you going to give him the avodah?
And so for Trumas Hadeshin,
which is labor.
Which is okay. I hear it's a good horror. So kan bebari, kan b'chayla. Okay, a person has a weak muscle tone and he's unable to isolate fingers, so he puts out 2. Easier to put out 2 than 1. Okay, v'hatanya, We learned in a braysa, achatz moitziyin, shtayim ein moitziyin. Says put out one and don't put out two. So the Gemara says, b'met b'marmurim b'bari. Yeah, a bari shouldn't put out two. Aval b'chayla afilu shtayim moitziyin. Okay, the ha yechidim, which Rashi says refers to chaylim. We're going back to chaylim over here. Moitziyin shtayim. Okay, they put out two. However, ve'ein mainin lahem ela achas. Even though a guy puts out two fingers, he only gets one. He's one lottery spot, right? You just count as one number. Ve'ein mainin lahem ela achas. Really, you only count one. V'hatanya. We have a brayso that says ein moitziyin lo shlish v'lo gaidol. So you should not put out your shlish, is let's say your ring finger or your gaidol. Now Rashi says ima etzba, right? So what we're saying is, because we're going to count each person as one, so if you have the one finger would be your etzba, your pointer finger, okay? So now if I put out two, because I'm a chayla, so I put out the next finger, my middle finger, what I call my middle finger, so that's very near that it's the same person. The problem is if I put out my thumb, right, now it's in two different directions, you can try to count it, because the guy's counting fingers, he'll say, okay, 1, 2, you'll get an extra number. So if we see that it's coming towards you, the concern is you put out the gaidel and you get an extra number, you increase your chances of getting picked. Okay, also says the brayso, you shouldn't put out your ring finger. Okay, that also is too far apart. It looks like another person. So we're saying it's ein moitziyin lo shlish, which would mean the ring finger, v'lo gaidel, or the thumb, along with the etzba. That's what we're saying, okay? Mipnei haramoim. Because people are going to cheat the system and try to increase their chances of getting a better lottery spot. V'im hoitzi shlish moinen loy. Okay, so if you put out the shlish, it would count. Now, for some reason, the Gemara is taking havamina that it would count as two numbers. Because they're too far apart, we'd count them as two numbers, and that's what we're asking. Right? That was the kasha of the Gemara. Really, is that true? We do count the pointer finger and the ring finger, so it must be we count it as two numbers. Now, by the way, goydel. So what the brayso is saying is, if you put out your ring finger and your pointer finger, then we'll count it. The havamina is as two. The gaidel, if you put out your pointer finger and your thumb, ein mainin loy, we won't count that. You get disqualified. So if you put out this and this, then we're going to count you as two, is the havamina. Okay? Not disqualified. You're still in the pious. If you put out your pointer finger and your thumb, then you tried to cheat too much. So then, ein mainin loy, you're disqualified. V'loy oidel shaloike min hamamuna bepekia. Okay, you're going to get, right, the manager over the supervisor, the mamuna, the kind of mamuna, you're going to get malchus from him. Bipekia. So
What's Pekia?
Pekia, we thought, and if you remember in Shkolm, we had Pekia mamuna al ha Pekias we thought was wicks. And what we're saying is, so the Gemara is going to discuss what a Pekia is, but it's some sort of whip. Okay, my moinin. So the Gemara answers, right, so we're asking from the havamina that if I put out my pointer finger and my ring finger, then I'm going to be counted as two. The Gemara says, my moinin lay nami achas. It means only counted as one. It does not mean counted as two. Okay, so now my pekia, to Akiva's question, what is a pekia? So Amarav madra. It's a madra. Ah, good, now I got it. Madra. My madra. What's a madra? Amarav papa mitarka detai. It's a whip from the Arab merchants, the pasuk ratio that has a split for better efficacy. It's split at the ends. It has a split end, oxtail or something. Okay, so Amar Abaya. So that's why we call it a pekia. So it's a split whip for increased pain. Amar Abaya. Mereish hava amina. Originally, I thought that which we said in Shkolem hadatanan ben baboy mimun ala pekia. So I thought, and the way the Gemara understood it there is amina psilta. I thought pikiyas were wicks. Kedetnan mavliya michnasei kaihanim. That what would they do with the worn out pants of the kaihanim? Umei hem yenehan. And from their belts, so with leftover clothing, again, we'll see this throughout Shas. They were very utilitarian. Nothing went to waste. So when it was done, they would make wicks out of them. Meno you mafkiyin. So I thought it meant they would make wicks, right? It's good linen material to make wicks for the menorah. I thought mafkiyin meant mix, and they would light. Kima the shemana laha. So I see that no. What I thought was the wick maker, simple benign job, guy making good wicks for the menorah, what was really his job? The Tanya Amina my Pekia Nagda. So that guy who I thought was the whip maker, he's the enforcer. That's who he really is. Mamuna ala Pekia meant he was in charge of whipping people for violating pious rules, for trying to cheat the system. Okay. So anyway, so we had in the Mishnah, we had a story. So back before they had a pious, people would race up. And what would they do? They would. What happened? There was a story. When did they put an end to racing up? That one guy pushed another guy and he broke his leg. Tanar Rabbanan Maisa. Now we're going to have a similar story, except this one will result not in a broken leg, but murder. Tanar Rabbanan Maisa b'shnei kayhanim shayu shneim shavin. Okay, they were tied, running up the ratzin va'elim bekevesh. Kadam echad mehem l'toich arba amos shel chaverav. Okay, so they got close to each other. Natal sakin, he took a knife. V'tokalei belivai. Okay, so I guess I don't know. It sounds almost like it was before the race. They measured them up and they saw okay, we're gonna, where he knew that they were gonna be even. So he was trying to gain a competitive advantage. So he stabbed the other guy with a knife. Belivai. Amar Reb Tzadak Amala, so Ulam. Reb Tzadak stood up on the stairs of the Ulam. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean the Ulam, Rashi says. Bahar Bais Ulam is Harbe Bana Sham Hurdis, that there were many different ones. So one of the Ulams, he stood up on a platform, on the stairs, okay, and he said, Amar Achenu Beis Yisrael, Shamu, listen, what does the Pasuk say? Ki matzeh chalal ba'adam, if I find a corpse on the ground, v'yatzu zekenecha v'shayftecha, this is Egla Rufa, okay, that they go out and they deal with it. They have to bring a carbon egla rufa. Anu ami lahavi egla rufa. Who is going to bring the egla rufa here in the Beis Hamikdash? Ala ir ala azaris. Is it on the city, the people in Yerushalayim, or does the Azara have to bring an egla rufa? Okay, the Gemara will discuss this because really none of them have to bring it. Okay, go kala bechia. Everybody cried out. Everybody was weeping and wailing. Ba aviv shel tinuk.
Wait, what just happened over there? Why is everybody crying?
As like a musar, he got up. He's like, "Can you believe what happened?" It's like that we condone murder in the Beis Hamikdash. Okay.
But isn't Egla Roof only when you...
Yes, the Gemara is going to discuss it. Yeah, the Gemara will discuss it in a minute. Go kala we're going to say it's not real. Go kala bebechia.
No, it was saying it for speech purposes.
Exactly. Yeah. So go kala bebechia. Everybody started crying. Ba'aviv shel tinak. This child, meaning this kayin that got stabbed, his father came. He was like convulsing on the ground as he was dying. Amar, he said, "Arehu kaparaschem." This is it's designed for a kapara. Vadayin b'ni mefarfer. Okay, so this should be for a kapara. My son is dying, and while he's not dead yet, what should we do? V'lei nitmas sakin. Make sure the knife that was used in the stabbing, the murder weapon, does not become tameh. Lam dechasha kasha aleim taras kalim yoser b'shvichas dam. That making sure that the taras kalim in the Beis Hamikdash was more important, was not more important, but was more. It was kasha. They had a harder time. Murder, they could be sevel. Kalim in the Beis Hamikdash becoming tameh, they couldn't. V'cheinu Eimer, what does the pasuk say? V'gam damnaki shafach Menashe harbe me'oid. That Menashe, we see that the pasuk Malachim is saying that Menashe, the murder became commonplace. That murder was so commonplace, so that didn't faze them. But Tamei Kalim in the Beis Hamikdash, that was very rare, and they were very sensitive towards that. Hi, Maisa Kadim.
You're saying this in a positive and a negative?
No. Obviously it's in a negative way, but it was what it was.
All this because they wanted to do the Avodah in the Beis Hamikdash.
So they got carried away. So we now have two Maisa where the Kohanim, they originally was a race and they got carried away. One Maisa we had in the Mishnah where a guy broke a leg, and we had a Maisa and a Brisa where a guy killed each other. So the question is, Hi Maisa Kadim, which Maisa came first? So Ilim b'deshvichas damim. So if you want to tell me that the murder story happened first, sahashta shvichas damim letakinu paisa, right? So we want to know which came first, and at the end of both Maisas, we had a pious. That means that one Maisa happened and we didn't do anything, and then the other. So now if you say Ilema deshvichas damim, so if you want to say the murder Maisa happened first, hashta shvichas damim letakinu paisa, we didn't feel like it was necessary enough for murder to go ahead and make a pious anish b'ragli takina. Ella, you have to say the nish b'ragli kadem. The story with the broken leg. V'kiven the takinu paisa. Oh, one second. Yeah. So what happened? So he broke the leg, and we said, okay, a broken leg. We're not going to change the practice, the standard operating procedure in the Beis Hamikdash. And then the murder happened, and then it became a problem. Now, v'kiven takinu paisa arba amas ma'aviditayu. So if you're saying that that's true, then what is the arba amas, right? So if you're telling me that, right, so what's this whole arba amas that we're talking about? If the, sorry, one second.
The Brisa says that have meat
Right. Well, they both did also. Both the Mishnah said it as well.
Right. Isn't that the Gemara's question? That Arba'ams, if there was no pious yet, what does Arba'ams have to do?
The Kivan Zakino Paisa Arba'amas might be the Tayu. So right, what shaykhis do we have to Dalit Amos? Okay. Ela la'olam deshvichas damim kadem. So we're going to go back and say, really, the murder one happened first. Umeikara savar akroi ba'almahu. So again, and we see very interesting. If something like so shocking happens, like you don't need to make a rule change for that. Like that's such a crazy one-time event. We're not going to make a rule change for that. So really, the murder did happen, but it was so far-fetched and like it's murder. Like, come on, we're not going to. This one crazy guy did something. We're not going to change everything. However, okay. Kivan dechazi afilu memela asu, that they saw that even not for murder, still afilu memela asu de sakana, that we still have, and then they saw, okay, this happened, I got to talk. Okay, so the first, second time wasn't murder, but we see that in the heat of the competitive spirit, trying to get up there first, that we could also have sakana of shviras etzem as well. So then takin rabbanon paisa. Okay, so Lamaisa the Gemara is saying that the murder story happened first, and then the shviras etzem, and then they were masaki and epayis. Now, Amar Rav Tzadok Amala Sa'ula. So in the story, Rav Tzadok got up and he said, Amar Achenu Beis Yisrael Shimu. Harei Omer, it says, Ki Matzei Chalol Ba'adama. It says that if you find a corpse, Anan Amila Hevi, Ala Ir Ala Alzaris. Frak the Gemara of Yerushalayim, Basasuya Egla Rufa. Can Yerushalayim? It's not even a game for Egla Rufa. That is not one of the cities. If you find an right, what's an egla? If you find a dead corpse in between two cities, then the cities have to bring an egla rufa, right? So you don't know you don't know who murdered him. So you bring an egla rufa, right? There's a kanim of the closer city, bring an egla rufa, or if it's in between the two. So, anyways, so it says the Gemara is asking Yerushalayim Basasuya Egla Rufa. Yerushalayim is not a city that you bring egla rufa. Tanya, it says Asar Dvarim Nemer Yerushalayim Zuach Tzmehem. And Rashi explains, if you remember, we had before a machlokes whether Yerushalayim was neschalku or not. Was it split up? So we're saying that according to the Mandam Rav holds that it was not neschalku, so then that's why it did not have to bring an Egla Rufa. But what is the rules of Egla Rufa? Lo neda mihi kahu. It's dependent on not knowing how this person got murdered. V'ha neda mihi kahu. Here, Lamaisa, they did know. So the Gemara says you're right that Rav Tzadok didn't really mean that they should bring an Egla Rufa. Okay, they wanted to increase the severity of the event and use it as a opportunity for Mutzer. And further in the story, they saw that the son was writhing; he was about to die. Right, so we saw that Taras Kalim was considered more severe than Shvichas Damim. So the Gemara asked the Shaila, Shvichas Damim hu dizol. Was it that murder was cheap, life was cheap, and it wasn't that they held Taras Kalim in such high regard, but murder, blood was cheap. Or then murder was always just as severe as it was, but they were just extra careful. How do we end the story? We brought a pasuk. What did we say? The gam dam naki shafach menasha. So we said we see that blood was cheap, life was cheap in those days. And what we're saying is, we're trying to highlight that it was a bad thing that they did care about the Taras Kalim, not that they took extra any more than they did previously, but that we see that life was cheap.
So it's just like historically, this was just like a really not such a great time?
This is second Beis Hamikdash. Tzadok was second Beis Hamikdash, I believe.
So this is just
bad times. Tana Rabbanon. Although the pasuk that we bring from Menashe is in the times of the first Beis Hamikdash.
Really?
But yeah, which is interesting. So I guess could be for 800-year period or whatever it is. Blood was cheap. Tana Rabbanan. Upashat velavash. Okay, so now let's go. We're going to talk about Trumas Hadeshin. So the Gemara now is going to discuss. We know that for Truma, there's Trumas Hadeshin and then there's Hitza'as Hadeshin. Two different things. So the pasuk says, Upashat velavash begadim acherim v'hitzias Hadeshin. So we're talking about, this is after Trumas Hadeshin, that he takes off his clothes, he puts on other clothes, and he brings out the Deshin. That's the Hitza'as Hadeshin. So originally we were talking about Trumas Hadeshin, now Hitza'as Hadeshin. Shemeini, the Havamina is, I would have thought, Kederach Yom Kippurim, that when we're saying change clothing, just like on Yom Kippur, Sheposhit Big Day Kaddish V'Levish Big Day Chol, Talmud Loimar. So just like you change from one clothes to another clothes, now in Yom Kippur you change from Big Day Zahav to Big Day Lavan, Big Day Lavan to Big Day Zav. So too over here, we're saying change clothes. Now we're talking about a regular kayin, regular avodah. So if he's wearing Big Day Kodesh for the Trumas Hadeshin, so then when we say change your clothes, it means put on Big Day Chol to do the Hitza'as Hadeshin. Shepash Big Day Kodesh, Shalosh Big Day Chol. Talmud Loimar Upashat Begadav, Belamash Begadam Acherim. That still what the Tanakama holds is we're being makish the begadim of these two together. And that no, you don't go from Big Day Kodesh to Big Day Chol, but rather we're makish both Trumas Hadeshin and Hitza'as Hadeshin need to be done with Big Day Kodesh. Makish begadim shalevish the begadim shepayshet malalam Big Day Kodesh afkan Big Day Kodesh. If so, what about that word, pesky word acherim? Even came out acherim pchusin mehem. So what we're saying is the Tanakama holds that both when the pasuk says acherim, it's telling you use other Big Day Kodesh. Dahainu, both Trumas Hadeshin and Hitza'as Hadeshin have to be done with Big Day Kodesh, Big Day Kahuna, but you use, for the Hitza'as Hadeshin, which is a lower level avodah, just to take it out, you use lower level clothing, and Rashi explains what does that mean. Either worn out ones, shchakim, right, ones that are well worn, use the used old Big Day Kahuna, or you use ones that aren't necessarily, they didn't come fresh from the cleaners, they're not properly pressed. Or they're not, right? So what we're saying is they both have to be Kodesh, but you use a lower level of Big Day Kodesh. Rebbe Lezer Aimer, Acherim v'Haitzi, that the whole Acherim, that has nothing to do with the clothing. It's talking about the Kayim. That we see that, what is Acherim? It's coming to be Marbeh, that the person doing the avodah for Hitza'as Hadeshin, it's mutter with a balmon, okay? That he doesn't have to be a good kain. So what we're saying here, is that at this point we're saying that there's Trumas Hadeshin, there's Hitza'as Hadeshin. There's some sort of downgrade for Hitza'as Hadeshin. According to the Tanakama, the downgrade is structurally. The downgrade is just they both have to be done with Big Day Kodesh. They both have to be done with a kayin. They both have to. It's treated like a real avodah. It's just the downgrade is you use a lower level of clothing. Also, Big Day Kodesh has to be done with a kayin. Has to be done with Big Day Kodesh, but a lower level of begadim. According to Rabbi Lazar, that this whole v'acherim is coming to tell you that you can downgrade the whole avodah. That it does not need to be even done with a kayin. Or it could be a kayin balmum, which is, that's what we're coming to be marba. Now, Amar Mar, so we said, Acherim pchusim mehem. So let's just, in the Tanakhama, when we said we use lower level begadim, or not as nice clothing for the Hitza'as Hadeshin, Acherim pchusim mehem, where do we see this? The Tana of Rabbi Yishmael, begadim shabishal b'hem kedera. The Tana of Yishmael says that the begadim that you use to cook in the kitchen, l'rabba la'yimzag b'hem kais l'rabba. You shouldn't use to serve. Okay, that when you're doing a lower level avodah, use lower level clothing. So the Hitza'as Hadeshin is a lower level avodah, and therefore you should use lower level clothing.
This is an Indian of lower level, or that it's dirty?
It's stepping down.
No, I'm saying it just practically is it a dirty job?
You want to know, is Hitza'as Hadeshin any more dirtier than Trumas Hadeshin?
Shabishal behen kadera, the cook in the kitchen gets dirty.
Right, but
is that the idea or no?
Yeah, I mean, Minastam, you'd have to say that, either way you're dealing with Deshen, right? And it's funny, like there are some Rishonim, like the Meiri says that there's actually 3 levels. That regular Avodas Kain Gadol has to be done with like A-level clothing, Trumas HaDeshen is B-level clothing, and Hatzas HaDeshen is C-level clothing. Okay, but I think at this point what we're saying is that I don't necessarily know if it's more dirty. It's just that the Torah is considered, could be, the Torah is considering it a lower level of avodah.
This is the only time you'd find this idea of clothing?
Like different clothing, other than Yom Kippur, where we see that there's a mile on the clothing. Okay, Amar Reish Lakish, k'machlekes b'hitza'a kach machlekes. Okay, so now we have a machlekes over here. Now, it sounds like this whole pasuk, that we have a machlekes between the Tanakama and Rebbe Lazar, is only an Eitzah at this point. Right? That when it comes to Eitzah Sadeshen, does the Kohen Gadol have to wear Kaddish clothing? So Amar Reish Lakish, k'machlekes b'hitza'a kach machlekes b'harama. Reish Lakish says, no, this machlekes is by harama, by Trumas Hadeshen as well. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, machlekes b'hitza'a, aval b'harama divrei kol avodahi. So Rabbi Yochanan says, no, that the machlekes is only by Eitzah, but everyone's going to hold that Trumas Hadeshen is an avodah and would require full Bigdei Gehuna. So what's going on? My time at the Reish Lakish. Why does Reish Lakish say that it's a machlekes in both Trumas Hadeshen and Haramas Hadeshen? So because Reish Lakish says, if you want to tell me that Trumas Hadeshen is a real avodah, yesh avodah sheksher b'shnei kelim. Is there an avodah that would only be kosher with 2? Kain has to wear 4. What does it say by Trumas Hadeshen? It says umichnes sevad yilbash al basarei. Okay, we bring in the only two begadim that are mentioned in the pasuk is the michnasayim and the kseinis. So Elamai, from the fact, comes Reish Lakish and says, from the fact that the pasuk says you only need 2 begadim, it must be, it's not a real avodah, period, end of story. According to Rebbe Lazar, who holds that Acherim is telling you that a Baal Mum can do it. What does that mean? That a Baal Mum can do it, it's not a real avodah. Baal Mum can do the Hitzas Hadeshen, and it's not a real avodah, and just like we see by the Trumas Hadeshen, only 2 begadim, and therefore Rebbe Lazar's entire shita is it's not a real avodah. You don't need a Baal Mum can do it. Okay, both the Trumas Hadeshen and the Tzas Hadeshen. Why? Because you can do. We see from the fact that you can do the Trumas Hadeshen with 2 begadim. Rabbi Yochanan says no. Gali Rachmana b'Kseinos mechnasai b'uadin lemitznefes va'amneit. That the pasuk told you those 2, but really it means you need all 4. So Rabbi Yochanan holds that the machlekes is, Rabbi Yochanan holds that everybody holds that for Trumas Hadeshen you need all 4 begadim. Okay, and therefore there's no debate. Both Rabbi Lazar and the Tanakam are going to have to agree that Trumas Hadeshen, taking the Kmitza, that is a real avodah. You need all 4 begadim. And the only machlekes is, when it comes to Eitzas Hadeshen, when we said we step down, that's where it's a machlekes. Do we step down in clothing, or do we step down that it's considered a lower grade of avodah, or it's not an avodah, and therefore it could be done with a zar? So what does Acherim refer to? Clothing or people? Umay shnahani, in Rav Yochanan, if you're telling me that for Trumas Hadeshen, you really need all 4 begadim, so why did the pasuk only say for Trumas Hadeshen that you need 2, Mechnasayim and Kseinis? So the Gemara says, what are we learning? Midei vad. No, we're coming to learn other things out of here. We're not specifically saying only these 2. We're telling us something. Midei vad, midei kimidasai, that the Kseinis has to be fitting, it has to be form-fitting, right? It can't be too long, it can't be too short. Michnesei bad. Why did the pasuk say michnesei bad? To tell me that you have to put the pants on first. So why did the pasuk mention these 2? Because we're learning other limudim out of it. Okay, so now Reish Lakish. So where's Reish Lakish going to learn these things from? Midai kimidasai. So where is he going to learn that the big thing? If he holds, Reish Lakish holds that the pasuk is just coming to tell you that you only need 2 begadim, which means that Rebbe Lazar is going to be able to hold that you only need, since you only need 2 begadim, it's not a real avodah. Therefore, it'd be kosher with a Baal Mum. So Reish Lakish midai, where's he going to learn this thing of form fitting and that the pants have to go on first? That how did we refer to the Kasainas is midai bad yilbash al basarai? We called it midai bad. We didn't say Kasainas bad yilbash al basari. We said midai, so that's where we learn fitting from. Shaloyeh davar kadam l'chasayim. That is going to learn from michnei say bad yilbash al basari. So I'm going to learn that from the al basari. So now, okay. So that is the machlekes over here. And I'm just going to go a couple minutes longer because rather just finish the sugya. So Nema Ketanoi. We have a machlekes here. We have a machlekes between Reish Lakish and Rav Yochanan. Nema Ketanoi. Let's say that this is like the following machlekes Tanaim. Al Basari. What does the pasuk says? Mechne Sebad Yilbash Al Basari. What is the Al Basari coming to tell me? Matam Alore Yilbash. If it already said Al Basari, why did it say Mechne Sebad Yilbash Al Basari? If you tell me Mechna Sevad, I have to have clothing al basari. Why do I have to say Yilbash? I wear on my basari. I know I could have just said Mechna Sevad al basari. Why do I have to say Yilbash? What's the matam Yilbash? Lahavi mitznefetz va'avnei. So laharama divrei Rabbi Yehuda. The Rabbi Yehuda is saying that when the pasuk says Mechna Sevad Yilbash al basari, it's telling me that even though the pasuk just learned Ksainis and Mechnasayin, it means add the other two begadim as well. This is by Trumas Hadeshen, which means that the pasuk is telling me that you need all four begadim by Trumas Hadeshen. And then again, like we understood in Rav Yochanan Shita, for instance, which is who this time is going to go like, why did it only say two? Is because I wanted to learn things out of it. But really, it really meant all four begadim. How do I know that from Yilbash? Rabbi Doisa Omer, what is the Yilbash? No, totally different thing. L'Rambais big day Kohen Gadol b'Yom Kippur v'shekashem l'Kohen Hedid. That after the Kohen Gadol is done with his begadim on Yom Kippur, those are linen clothing that a Kohen Hedid could use it throughout the year. Now, Amar Rebbe, this is really a side point, and if you remember, we brought this earlier in the Masechta. Amar Rebbe, he says, he's asking on Rebbe Doisa, Shtei Tshuvas B'davar. I have two kashas on you, Rebbe Doisa. Number one, Chalad Avnei Shekohen Gadol Loizev Avnei Shekohen Hedid. If you remember that machlekes before, he says you can't tell me that you're going to be able to use the Michnasei Bad. You're going to be able to use the Michnasei Bad that the Kohen used on Yom Kippur, that a regular Kohen is going to be able, the Kohen Gadol used on Yom Kippur, that a regular Kohen is going to be able to use it for Avodah throughout the year, because he says, Avnei Shekohen Gadol Loizev Avnei Shekohen Hedid. Okay, that's number one. They had a different Avneit, that his Avneit was, the Avneit that the Kohen Gadol, right, and therefore, the begadim that happened on Yom Kippur, that the Kohen Gadol wore on Yom Kippur, were completely linen, and during the year, the Avneit had to be Kalayim, Rebbe holds. If you remember, Rebbe holds it had to be Kalayim, even of a Hedyot, so therefore these aren't the same begadim. You can't just repurpose them. But begadim Shishtam Shem Kedusha Chamura, also it's not mistaber that if you use them on Yom Kippur for a Kedusha Chamura to go Lefnai V'Lefnim, Shishtam Shem Kedusha Kala, that you should use it for regular Avodah. So Elamatam Elamer Yilbash. What is the pasuk telling me? Yilbash, this is Rebbe, the third sheet of what Yilbash comes to tell me. Es hashchakim. The Rambam says hashchakim that you use, that you can use worn out clothing for this avodah of Trumas Hadesh, and you don't have to use your top level clothing. Okay, and what is v'hinicham sham? The pasuk says v'hinicham sham by Yom Kippur. That's Rebbe would hold shetut and geniza. That's Rebbe Shita that holds that you can't repurpose them. You can't repurpose the begadim that were used by the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. Therefore, they need to be buried. That it just means you shouldn't use it for another Yom Kippur, but you could repurpose them. Okay, so either way, now again, we're just having machlekes what Yilbash means. So let's ignore Rebbe for the moment, okay, and let's just look at the first two. Rabbi Yehuda, it says Yilbash is coming to tell me that when it comes to Trumas Hadeshen, it's telling me that the other two begadim that weren't listed in the pasuk, the kohen also has to wear. So my lab, the Mar Savar Rabbi Yehuda holds avodahi. Must be it's a real avodah. Umar Savar Rabbi Doisa holds lab avodahi. It's not a real avodah, and that's why he's using Yilbash to tell me something else, to tell me that I knew that I could use that a regular kohen could use it later. So the Gemara says, "Loi the kuli alma avodahi." Really, both. This is not that. Yes, there is a machlokes between Reish Lakish and Rav Yochanan. If according to, let's say, Rebbe Elazar, we're going to consider, if according to Rebbe Elazar, we're going to consider Trumas Hadesh and a real avodah or not. Okay. However, that is not this machlokes Tanaim. Here, both Rav Doisa and Rav Yehuda hold that it is in fact an avodah. The question is, do I need a reboy to tell me the other begadim, or was it pasha? Mar Savar Tzricha Kra. Rabbi Yehuda holds I needed a pasuk because since by Trumas Hadeshen it only lists two begadim, the ksainis and the mechnasayim. So I needed a riboy to include the other two, to tell me that it's a real avodah and you need all four begadim. And the other Mar said, no, Mar Savar Leitzricha Kra L'Rubuye, it's mistaber that if you need two, you need four, right? Either it's an avodah and you need Bigdei Kodesh or not. And therefore, what is the Yilbash coming to tell me? The Yilbash is coming to tell me specifically that I can reuse them for a Kohen Gadol later.
Got it.
I'll send out the. I'm going to do even though it's late. I'm going to do a quick summary. Try to do it in 2 minutes over here. Okay, so we started off saying that any Talmud Chacham that's not Eina Noikem V'Noiter is not a Talmud Chacham. And we said, what about L'Sikaim? The Pasuk says it is the rest. We said that's B'Mamain. Okay, so B'Mamain, it's usher to take revenge or bear a grudge. Okay, and therefore we said, but also we said Belibe, that you have to keep it. Yes, you have to have, you bear a grudge, and a Talmud Chacham bears a grudge when he's Tzara B'Guf, right? When there's somebody insulted him or somebody did something to him, but he keeps it inside. Okay, and what does that mean? That means that if you see other people going to take up your cause to defend your honor, you don't have to stop them. And we said that also, in even still, if the guy who hurt you asks for mechila, you should grant him mechila. Okay, and then we discussed about the fingers. We said, do you take one or two? We said it depends. So if you're a chayla, you are mitzi two. You don't have the dexterity, and or bari would be mitzi one. But either way, you only count as one. You only get one number. We're counting fingers because we don't want to count heads. Okay, and we said, what about the third one we discussed, right? It sounds like, we said that if you put out your ring finger together with your etzba, we'll count it. It sounded like two. We said, no, you're counting it as one. And we said that even if you do that, you do the ring finger together with the etzba, that will only, we only count as one, but we're not going to disqualify you. Versus if you do etzba and thumb, we'll disqualify you and you'll get whipped by the Ben Pekia, who we originally thought was the wick maker, but we realized he was the enforcer. Okay, and then we discussed the story of the two Kayanim running up, right? And this is a murder, different story where they got murdered. And we tried to, we understood, so Rav Tzadok got up and he said, what about Kimat Seichalo? We said, okay, really there's no Eglah Rufa there, right? There's no Eglah Rufa. He was just doing it to get them in the mood. Okay, and we saw the son's father came. We said that, and he was worried about the knife, even though his son was dying. He was worried about the knife not becoming tameh. We see that they were more sensitive towards Tumas Kalim because blood was cheap. Okay, but either way, we said that we see that we tried to bring a raya that the maisa of the breaking the leg was first, and then this. We said no, not necessarily. Could very well be that it wouldn't make sense in the brisa because it said teich arba amas. So we would say that really that the murder maisa happened first, but because it was so wild, we didn't feel the need to make a takana. And then after we saw that there were still further incidents, the hainu of breaking of legs and things like that of sakana, then they made it. Okay, then we discussed this in regards to Trumas Hadeshen. So the pasuk said upashat v'haitzi. Okay, so we said that that the havamina was that you switch from Bigdei Kodesh to Bigdei Chol. Okay, like a Kohen Gadol switches from Bigdei Lavan to Bigdei Zahav. So the pasuk says Tamalav pashat v'lavash, that we're makish the two begadim. The hainu, the begadim you need for Trumas Hadeshen, and the begadim you need for Haitza'as Hadeshen. What does the pasuk mean? Kodesh, acherim, begadim acherim. So we're saying that they're kodesh but psuchim. You take a step down. So acherim means use a lower level of begadim. That's what Tanakama holds. Although he says both of them voida b'kayin, good kayin. Okay, it has to be done with a good kayin, and it has to be done with Bigdei Kodesh. Okay, and then Rabbi Lazar said that no, acherim has to do with the kohanim, that a kohen balei mum is going to be kosher for Tzas Hadeshen. Rish Lakish says that, by the way, this machlekes is not only on Tzas Hadeshen, but even for Trumas Hadeshen, Rabbi Lazar holds it's not a real avoida, dahainu, that you could do it with balei mumin. And Rabbi Yechanan says that no, sorry, everybody is going to agree harama is a real avoida. Okay, meaning, what does this mean? Rabbi Shakish holds that you only need two begadim. He learns the pasuk dafka when we said two begadim, and therefore by Trumas Hadeshen, and therefore since you only need two begadim, it's not a real avodah. Okay, he learns from the mishana of the words that we use midai and yilbash or yilbash or abasare by mechnasayim to learn other things that the mechnasayim have to go on first. Yilbash that has to go on first, and that has to be fitted. Rav Yechanan says, no, you need all 4 kelim. Why do we highlight these two again? To learn those 2 things out, but really you need all 4. Okay? We tried to say, so again, we have a machlekes here, is the fact, according to the Tanakama, if Haitzas Deshen has to be done by Kedusha, is a real avodah, so for sure Trumas Hadeshin is. Really, the machlekes is, according to Rabbi Lazar, who learned Acherim to tell me Haitzas Deshen can be done with a Balmum. Since it can be done with a Balmum, I just want to speak this out, Balmum is essentially the same as a Zar, non-Kayin, so it must be, it's not a real avodah. And the question is, do I extend that concept of Rabbi Lazar to Trumas Hadeshin as well? That's the machlekes for Shulchan Aruch. Yechanan, we wanted to say that maybe this is the machlekes between Rev Yehuda and Reb Daisa. Then Reb Yehuda and Reb Daisa had a machlekes. What is the Yilbash by Trumas Hadeshin coming to tell me? Reb Yehuda said to add the other 2 begadim. Must be it's a real avodah. And Reb Daisa said no. I use it to tell me the hinicham sham that I can reuse the begadim. That I can use the begadim from Yom Kippur. The Kohen Gadol's on Yom Kippur. I could reuse it for avodas hedyot throughout the year. Again, Rebbe took issue with that for 2 reasons. Number one, he said the abnates are going to be different. That the Kohen hedyot wears an abnate klayim, and the Kohen Gadol wear only pure linen on Yom Kippur, and he says it doesn't make sense that you have begadim that you use to go lefnai v'lefnim, and then you hand them down to a regular kohen to use, some other random avodah. Okay, so elamai, but either way, so we wanted to say that machlekes between Rav Yehuda and Rav Daisa, do I use Yilbash to be marbid the other 2 begadim? Is this machlekes whether Trumas Hadeshin only needed 2 begadim or needed all 4? Dahainu, can you say that there's a machlekes here that Trumas Hadeshin isn't a real avodah or not, only needs 2 versus needs 4? And we said, no, really, they both hold it's a real avodah. According to Rabbi Yehuda, he held you needed to be married the other 2 begadim. Rabbi Daisa said it was understood that when we needed 2 begadim, there's no concept of having 2 big day kodesh. So if you needed 2, you needed 4. Elamai is able to use that pasuk, the reboy, for something else.